an Italian symposium called In the Rhythms of the World. The symposium is sold out, but there will be a kind of sort of impromptu sort of walk-in situation. So you can try showing up and probably will make it in. And if not, there's also the symposium will be live streamed. What else? Pick up our newsletter, pick up the new New York Crimes issue. There are also books for sale. Flag by Imani and Fayuca by Christopher. If you haven't grabbed a copy, you should. They're both incredible, as you'll hear from them tonight. What else? There are 2 all-gender bathrooms on the first floor and an accessible bathroom on the ground floor. If you need to get there, let me or anyone else on staff know, and we'll help you get there. And I think that's it for me. I see so many familiar faces. So nice to be in a room full of friends. Okay, we'll begin with Christopher. I will introduce him, and then Imani will read. Okay. So, Google Doc. Okay. I just want to say, Chris, there are so many things that are not in this intro. So many. I didn't know if to write a personal intro or not, and I decided not. So I'm just going to talk about your work. Okay. Christopher Ray Perez is a poet from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. His first book, Gauguin's Notebook, from Northwestern University, received the 2015 Madeleine P. Plunkers Prize from Lake Forest College. He is also the author of Fayuca, a book on markets and movement with Disonare editorial in Mexico City, and Future Tourism, a chapbook with Sputnik and Fizzle on love, travel, and class. Together with Gabriel Finotti, he runs the nomadic and multilingual publishing project Dulce Stil Criollo. Christopher is probably the first poet I ever befriended. There's a peculiar quality to a friendship with someone whose job is to transmute traces of experience into new aesthetic arrangements, releasing them from privacy, dipping in and out of a flickering totality now materialized in this form, which is where I belong, I think, when I read Christopher's work, feeling deep kinship with its fractured sense of place, Spanish transliteration of laughter, marketplace sociality, doubling down on the logic of a world that keeps spitting us out by finding a way in from below. I met Christopher in 2013 in the US while living in Beirut. I loved his work so much that my friend Karine and I put together a small press to publish On the Heels of My Enemy, a long poem collapsing borderlines between Texas, where Christopher was born, and Palestine, where he was living at the time. There was Ernesto and Sonia, their love triangle, Nico, who lived in Buenos Aires and ate kibbeh, a poet warming up sushi in a microwave, or was that in Gauguin's Notebook? I no longer own a copy of the poem, nor can I find it on the internet, but 12 years later, I still experience the same impulse when reading Chris's work. I want everyone else to read it too. Like a necessary inoculation, his poems craft a global language against the necropolitical borders of a globalized world, subsuming what subsumes us, and in doing so, restoring the life-giving dissonance we all need to break free. In Fayuca, his most recent book, Tepito is the historical locus for goods sold and exchanged. Everybody meets at the market and everyone is different. Buying an object being sold, substituting in an ongoing deferral of desire one need for another. But in Tepito, objects are also slowed down by their defective copies, ripped CDs, pirated films, obsolescence, paradoxically creating an abundance of sociality. Quote, "We abscond under the Nike swoosh, then head right by fur jackets and, quote, "If a sacrifice is needed, I'll renounce my part and take yours." Since I've known him, Chris has been drifting through the global south, its peripheral matrix, which is perhaps why the prospect of a life in New York depressed him at first. But unlike the flaneur bewildered by modern shine, Christopher's thoughts, which are in his steps, are steeped in soil and water, soft matter stretching the poetic line, slowing it down with 20,000 thoughts like a cumbia rebajada. Mud walking, a poetic modality Christopher has been thinking about, is at the antipodes of flux and globality. Time is unnatural, he writes, and running looks dumb. We have to contend with matter, with the weight of being alive. In the section of Fayuca titled Homenaje a los Reclusos, Christopher transcribes and translates Sonido Pancho's live-streamed DJ set addressing inmates during lockdown, with special shout-outs to cousin brothers, parent friends, each called by name, Lorena Gonzalez, each name a neighborhood, Vanessa from Tepito, which is how folklore fucks with separability, restoring the individual to the social fabric capital has severed us from. Mariana, Natalia, Alberto, Sonia, Dario, Ray, Gabriel, Alexis, Jake, Danez. We're here now, interpolated into an internationalist sociality, exchanging one name for another, becoming friends in an economy beyond the poem. Please join me in welcoming Christopher Roy Perez.
Thank you, Mirene, for that beautiful introduction. I'm a little awestruck. It's a pleasure to be here today and to read a little bit of my writing. I'm very excited to be reading with Imani and look forward to that reading as well. I, for the past year or so, have been, I guess, writing about music and place, sort of always about place, but maybe through the lens of music. And I'm going to read a kind of condensed version of a manuscript that I'm currently titling or calling Authenticity Drill. In terms of the music, it looks at and thinks about and listens to Brooklyn drill in particular, and maybe rap music in general, vis-a-vis a genre of Mexican music called corridos tumbados, which, and I assume everyone is maybe more familiar with US rap and drill, but if you're unfamiliar with corridos tumbados, Peso Pluma right now is kind of like the number one person on the radio, but my favorite is a musician called Junior H. I'm just going to read straight through. Roll another one. Said I'm never lacking, always pistol packing. With them automatics, we're going to send them to heaven. Wait. Aye. Woo, huh. Oh, you feeling sturdy, huh? Shake some, huh? Shake it, huh? Shake it, huh? Shake it, huh? Headphones blocking my street. Gold tassel across frosted windows. The impatient shrill of the violin cutting through fruit vendors. Shea butter, dog walking. Opening up, you've got to say something if it's about freedom. I'm listening to Lady Gaga as my dialectics. Energy waves or vibes dig deep like gentrifying. Pop smoke isn't the antenna of the race or the fucked up social environment on 300 Zooms. I'm teaching, administrating, the trap, the work, the new person of color, POC, experience. But what about my ticket to heaven? In Crown Heights, I could just as well be Jewish or Caribbean, dreaming and ignorant, but nonetheless dreaming. In 2012, once I get educated at Bard, I'm going to forget what my own experience of violence has been like. I asked my mother what Uncle Tony is doing in Michigan. Is he Dom Perignon, Lady Gaga, lentes en la cara, tu si lavada, triple lavada, y una bandida que me llama, quiere mi lana y no está mal? Meditating on hybridity like cousins hell-bent on eventual dispersal, I'm more likely to tune my ears to the present, everyone waiting, and it's the perfect time to make general noise. I'm in a place I can't live in. I dislike it here, but not in the way I disliked Palestine, with no one to talk about Bobby Pulido with all night long. Confess almost retrograde to one's politics that from this ignorance you feel something, and on the worst days, Ray is constantly harassed. In fact, her life's threatened daily. That's why she's getting surgery in order to improve the experience of walking. I also hear the music left behind persisting, but mine's louder on the way to St. John's Park, where my workout programs to quicken the dead. I practice calisthenics with black men calling me papi. A Hasidic family passes by when the sun sets, 8 people deep at the zenith of preserving settlements, entirely antithetical to the reality of the experimental slum city. Why won't you get in trouble for speaking the 5 Spanish words you know to me? AstroTurf is tough, money smell maddening, one's own chronic eighth. My iPhone screen's locked, and you have to admit that it's becoming increasingly apparent to the open you love that you hate everybody, and that is criticality. The volume raised all the way, introducing the fake grassy lawn to the requinto. When you realize there is only one world, and you also made it. It would be easier to lean into degeneracy, but I feel old school between verified cowardice and pessimism. Arriving to New York, I got bonded to the hermeneutics of ecstasy and expensive Uber rides, lonely to the future, where I could start pulling themes. Even if I'm afraid to reveal I'm eating a $6 pistachio croissant with Mirene on Vanderbilt Ave because her extemporaneous review of Fayuca was spot on. I tried to call it a diamond to explain my compulsion of editing down 10 years of travel to Mexico and knife-thin, elusive verbiage now telling a story. The permission to narrate, not so candid nor purged of literary feeling. I'm temporary. My proximity to the hood is via el barrio. But the truth is, I grew up as the American lower middle class, surrounded by farms and grapefruit orchards. The only poem I wrote that my parents remember is the one about my grandfather who left watermelons on the front lawn my father turned into a plaque. Every couplet got its own plate. When I was interviewing Chris O'Kane for the micro-colleges, he said that he had never experienced any other place like the Rio Grande Valley. Yeah, still my criticality is not critical thought. Football Club Barcelona and the Ultimate Fighting Championship of my YouTube recommended is no longer embarrassing. Ray first moved in a year ago, and I had to make up some excuse about discipline in the human body, and I wasn't outright lying. I told her all the other poets I work with and even administer have other things going for them, like legacy, heritage, education, cultural capital, or devotion. My Ars Poetica had formed an algorithm with occasional thirst trap content. I'm afraid if these lyrics sound better foreign on the same old difference of curiosity. My desire is to hold on to people who have torn off their limbs, and I don't like talking about it. The cred's negligible. Because the Rio Grande Valley gives substance, a tunnel to the USA, my process has remained the same, to please everybody. Don't come at me if dressed indoor, even though I'd feel ridiculous talking about it. Like when Ray decided to show my incense and perfume collection to Mayada, Tai, and Daisuke, I had to pull out the ambergris. When speaking with my mom, I felt like she knew all my secrets because I'm her son. She was getting ice cream and didn't know I had clicked onto somebody named Muslet. It's no laughing matter. When a New York press picks you up, that could mean more work, maybe Nepo baby, or trips to limbo now spent benevolently. The thing is, I don't know if I believe in U.S. poetics as a sweeping statement that finally cures me of what this is, my profile. Its mannerism, the way one's life has been working into a self-ascribed other community, grandiose in cursi as likeness. There's more than unlearning when the suspect tries to be offended. I like fat asses, repetition, which can be theme or pattern, but not necessarily a habit of environment, hard on archetypes but impoverished by touching. Out of character, therapies renewed. I might explore the half shape of comparison, no cap, a brown experience, excellent service, the grade I would like to give everyone, A. Except I'm hard to topple, waking up early to music, the difference unseasonably participant to improvising healthy instincts amid a stranger's limits, communicating in English with an unstoppable murmur. What Kate Hardy told me was mumbling, but came through the queasy gut like a translation of heritage, the form of rhythm of speaking, forgetting its hair like Home Depot's parking lot, and is participatory. Restless as tread marks, blowing smoke circles, the new Latinx art of dislocation. I was watching Roberto's important talk on my sofa, a modulus, throwing a small party in response to the propensity of landing elsewhere. You hear me? The funniest thing being not globalization, but walking alone. The room I was in a pastiche of houseplants and a cat. Once Roberto said, so I begin. Grace was braiding Ray's hair in the bedroom, being careful not to pull on the staples across her incision. At that point, Tacuache aesthetics had reached the National Gallery of Art in D.C. Junior H's 1400 kilometros forever, I'm down. For grounding and analysis of the media particulars that vex the single focus on ethnicity. Between Gauna's work and Lartigue's taphonomic drawings conjured on the border of forensics and gender, I sank into my sofa, a modulis. Among some friends, music's enough. Viajé 1400 kilómetros pa verte. No será para siempre, un día volveré a verte. Others pierce right through like lava to talk about uncomfortable distancing, the troubling drama of class, the man shot on the A train with his own gun. I saw the National Guard at Franklin then, returning from Brooklyn College, subbing for Ray. Was the place with jerk chicken called Exquisite Supreme? Indians, Pakistanis passed by on mopeds for Grubhub, but they didn't concern me. The theme for the day was that music changes everybody. My writing was traveling hyperbolically from the center. The center fucked up like the Revoltas-like concept of experience as being at the summit of a mountain or the tip of a needle. Same as a casket, you can't close a corrido tumbado while inside it. The whole world is not Mother Earth, a solo hueso, juicy. Although we're left with the uncanny fault of political accuracy. The measures of a necessary language suggestive of willing. That's music, or sweetness. The transition from your potential to each other's values. The conversation, I think, is real when I tell my students that I don't go by association. That comes conveniently. It's so embarrassing, it can't be invertebrate going out in fila. Are you envious enough to act with great care toward the variables that aren't the day's business? The first contact could be walking into a bar with Mulatu Ishtatki and Ice Spice. A picture on the wood grain wall might be John Cusack. Diversity looks like consumerism, which is also part of working. A long history of affiliation, rubbing skin wrongly with eclectic meaning. Endemic like fungus, the goat of being predictable. In other words, ubermental, and ideologically the same. One world I'm living in, according to a hapless proprioception that has evolved out of the need for authorship in space. If I made music videos, I know myself well enough. I'd be too embarrassed to hire strippers, to recreate that time in Playa del Carmen with Hugo and Andres. I was already predicated on money and skin then, except the tempo picked up to a language no one but us spoke once they bought small bags of chips. They were spicy, the after party empty, the worst time to bring up Palestine. The first argument Yuki and I had before we even started dating was that she couldn't understand my project once I said I'd rather write about it comparatively than tell her what it was like living in occupied territory. It helped me understand later why Roberto loves the RGV and Yuki lives with the guy in Harlingen who loves his bicycle the same way I probably love football. After Instagram blocked me, I was also learning that I could be developing cancer, and yet music assuaged the creams. Somehow more free now that I didn't have to like a photo in response to genocide. That's why I love Ray, beans, and rice. My interests lie in resuscitating the day amid the increasing difficulty of phasing out my rage. Our escape won't be any truth-telling or veracity. Our little hairs standing on end. The rest is up to corroborating. The slurred voice of an inner demon, almost cartoonish. That's how it sounds from the dirty South, giving my body a real jolt on the worst days of bad licking. Oaxaca, 724. It's Christopher. I'm not from Mexico, I'm from the valley. Hypnagogia burns what nightmares won't depict. Love propaganda, mamas tlayudas in the mix. Fireworks go off and the desiring machine speaks. Press play to record, I'm walking on Allende. Saying buy me cigarettes wasn't being friendly. Don't know what's incumbent on the socius, ate all the food that was spicy, an eternal custodian. You're blown up on continuity, I, floating. Walking aimlessly, who are you in the game, really? As if folkloric prohibitions displace authorship, Janae has his minor threats and the global south go digging. Banditry of private property is cool, but what does skin feel? Commanding silence on the street isn't easy, it's Tuesday. An escalation of the indigenous remainder, my double entendre. And Muslim Gauze wouldn't travel to the Middle East. All attitude, big deal though, all labor, no beef. Al Jazeera with the volume up, what? It wasn't me. In a landscape of indecency, papalote and chapulín. All my kinks chased with mezcal, simple gesture, I'm cheesing. Tirando indirectas, who's linear, to please. Writing tells me what's interesting. Fan fiction, Benjamin, and Nikolai Leskov's Alexandrite. Are you glorifying fertile ruins, Monte Alban, copper clay pots to ferment life in? I'm ordering the mole almendrado. Language isn't always wealth, Daddy. What about it? All words for potato, code agua, you've got the shits. Malinche translated was never Cortes. Gap-looking affirmations fill in bricolage. What's that Darwish line asking for beta blockers? Various figures call me Senyo, I'm Bakik. Sorry, I'm hungry, it's raining, I'm terrified, yeah, faded. Body surfaces like graffiti, a bolero by Agustin Lara. Feeling hard done by museums. In Texas, trucks got nuts on them. The taxi said, trust Oaxacans, eat black beans. What's the holdup? My accent, change the reference. Jamaica Kincaid, the status of the commodity, magical realism. Yaw inside the whale's belly because the small place is broken. Like it's Coca-Cola, really? You're screaming? You're wearing hokas coming from the isthmus. Un huriconcito en el cielo para mí, you rock Guns N' Roses. Responding to the experiment, I eat white bread passing into anachronism. The police mount truck beds to collaborate with the military. Yeah, culottes will never be fashionable. Come at me straight to demonstrate the angle. My finger is poopy from memory. Your shit stinks. My uncle's in jail. Closure is much worse than elasticity, but either way, you know the drill. Couldn't pronounce the words right. Vulnerability, manjar, las Indias. Rhythms only held by the cross at the end of the bottle. Neither, nor, and you've got instant drama. The discourse of the nation state, guns blazing. From the backside, all that cake doesn't need any frosting. But turn the page and you're asked backwards eventually. An overcharged limbic system, now bodied. What's the nature of this order, if not ventriloquy? About time to relax, y'all. Dreads on Argentines incoming. Leisurely knowing yourself debunks your relation to governance. French black girls are hippest, but no more ornaments. Take to task your provisions for being here. She's a strawberry. By her flowers, they're innocent. I tell you death's everywhere, but differentiated. Nothing's unlimited. You got tricked. The flowers have no fragrance. If this isn't a mandate, it's the worst kind of charity. I don't care to make any friends. The last piece. Outro 11:23:24 La Juarez. Ganesh cornered me exiting Lucia and Diego's to the bazaar, where Senor Luis sold the Italian frames and the small flask of siete poderes to anoint my forehead and float, laser beaming in the denseness we are calling Gaza. You could be obsessed with holy war, making yourself a kind of Baroque chieftain. Logic sound is Adam Curtis cutting up images, high from syncopating your own perspective, like anyone with a fetish and arrest warrants for Netanyahu. Tommy Lee Sparta was bleaching his skin until it turned gray. In Baalbek, drones fly over our heads, now compote, syllabic, whirring. Meanwhile, my ops are angels, guilty by nature, obtuse to the question, counting reasons for visiting Gaza to shore up the soul of real estate. Me, I'm mud walking among such precision that the testament changes like all the options maxed out on your customizable character. You want to talk about pointless drills? Then let's talk about dark tourism. Ganesh looked fat and content while I was supposed to send Ray pictures of the view from the balcony, but was worried about why she wouldn't text back the reason for blowing up on my income. When I mentioned to my mom that love is loving as long as, and on the phone she says she loves me and won't hang up, it turns out it's always my turn to do so. In Austin, I first listened to grime when Double Dutch was producing for PopCan, and James, self-appellated Jamal, cleverly portmanteauing James and Mallard, wasn't yet addicted to heroin. He hadn't fallen on his head in the shower, wasn't aphasic yet, reminding me of everything we did together by means of chopped-up messages on Facebook. Orly had fallen off the overpass coming up from the valley, paralyzing himself for 17 months then. Demi was dribbling, and Andy selling hydro, tachas, and an occasional few kilos of coke. I was growing poppies, and Uncle Tony was still jailed, my mother ignorant of this, and Ray now learning little by little. Today, the fiesta involved John Cadla performing at Nogales 156. The time is stamped. I woke up in the middle of the night, and the chemicals killing the parts of me, possibly killing me, wrote an email to myself from my work account to my personal Gmail that in autofiction you cut your wrist in the mirror when the reader expects Baudelaire and you are looking for a wound. When I woke up again at 8 in the morning, I sent a reply saying, and you forget to heal. Later I realized in autofiction you got the world's spottiest smear, and where you expect to see the truth, you see last night's saliva, and then with how beautiful you are and me, so one of a kind. Natalia, who I saw again, reminded me you can live today or be in the middle of others who want to be wasting it. She said a witch told her, no les confíes en los santos con pies de barro. Once I confessed I was mud walking in Gaza. I was going to live those deaths in un anti-escapismo que una abiertamente la irrealidad para recordar los oyentes la cruel verdad de que no hay salida. At least if we think this is what we want it to mean. Raw fish or mushrooms on corn. As if we can all touch the sky and not get slimed, nor think like slime once ourselves or the idiom finally changes frequency, warm as chocolate mixed with water. Alegua privileges the suffering of sufferers like Jenny. You bleach your skin, but it can't be worth whistling. That's my manifesto. As false as it is therapeutic, like microdosing on word-out murals, being reincarnated Gloria, who's not like us. We're everybody. Trash talking way out of line, and you like Italians. Watch out if Ganesh is watching. This establishment does not discriminate upon the basis of race, religions, sexual orientation, physical condition, socioeconomic status, nor any other motive but respect, the exigency of frequenting anywhere, buying genocide-free cola or stopping by Quentin, where I bought the cinnamon bun from Zionists, and that molests me. Do I tip 4%, 45%, or 70%? Say less about my Mexico and Palestine. Giancarlo's feedback fed through Enrique's modular synth, bending the wooden floor I'm mud walking on. Tamarind, pulque, weed sprouting where there's earth. Natalia says come to Crystal's party, but the song lyrics say there's mud in my veins. The meme about eating jamon from the girl at Walmart already alive and dead. Laid out on the floor, Enrique's joke was that he did mop it. Look up at the ceiling and see nothing when the man selling tamales is on a tricycle on his way to the kiosco morisco. The formulation of perspective, a pressed flower from Danubio to Motolinia. One man with two hunchbacks like he's pregnant. The hijas de marijuana singing a collective love story. You can sit and sip tea and someone will say, oh, the love story. Passing by once you make eyes with the bartender under the banana leaves, rejecting the bellicose if she likes fregue, and your clouds above the waves, but still listening to footprints turning bodies into carceral burdens. Taking Leon's advice, I should head to Nonalco to find an apartment, but instead I'm mud walking, laughing like I'm gassed when you can't call this the trenches. No one's stuck on the carousel turned into a kingdom like animation. As if we're all friends, the day so early, you believe it's heaven sent, now it is. Shout out to Leroy Perez, my father, who listened to Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and bought Nirvana's and Green Day's compact discs, and ushers for my mother, who played that album in our Suburban. I loved Publishers Clearinghouse, the stereo system in our mobile home playing D-Light, Juan Gabriel, once my mother came home. I remember the crisscross tape my parents bought me at Best Buy I dropped into the cassette deck. Selena and lip-syncing La Carcacha in first grade, sitting cross-legged or Indian style in a circle. Julian dressed like Selena in purple. Turn the radio to 94.5 The Rock like a machine head. Middle school cheerleaders in step to DMX's Who Let the Dogs Out. You're listening to Antioch Arrow and all of early 90s West Coast hardcore, stuck in categorical relation on SoulSeek, buying a synthesizer, mail orders from 316 Records, a Los Crudos t-shirt, Orchid's early years of emotional hardcore becoming screamo. Project Pat's best song, Chicken Head. There was Ruben's mom with Lean from her pharmacy, Austin, Texas, Assaker, Juan Cisneros, Veronica, and the Carrots. Italo Disco Records, Happy Sucky, James Mallard, Black and Tan, Lil Wayne. Tractor, MIDI, and a Juno 60. Flex from Panama switched names and then played in 2,000 plus capacity clubs in Buenos Aires. Dime si te vas con él. In Salta, I bought a ripped Aventura CD. I saw Carlos Gardel imitators. Listen to Eo Sechipego and Minas Gerais. Have love for Jean-Luc Nancy. All the volumes of Los Cuentos de la Cripta, Baby Rasta, y Gringo. The online radio app for 102.5 La Leyenda transmitting to Ramallah. Los Tigres del Norte, Los Invasores de Nuevo León, Corridos Alterados compilations and the start of collabs, like Los Sanguinarios del M1. I'm listening to Fairuz in the morning and Kulthum in the evening, to Dam at the municipality. Uganda is in Jerusalem. Didar Kalash played a set, and afterward, Iran, Friends, Brian Eubanks, Cat Lamb, Gil Arno, Bard Choir, and Contact Mites. Marianne Ameche with speakers placed strategically for the best experience. Shout out to Matanav Roberts and Bob Bielecki. Banda El Vrecodo, Banda La Arrolladora El Limón, Banda Los Cuisillos, the marimba players in San Cristobal de las Casas, Conjuntos a Quinceañeras, the weddings of my childhood, a Belizean's rendition of Desvelado on the keyboard, Eric Rincones, Cumbia Tribal, DJ Screw volumes. We're slowing down the cumbias from Colombia. At El Royolito, Los Adolescentes are next on the jukebox. Salseros from Puerto Rico, presentes. Calle Sebastián, living above clubs, playing reggaeton, the mask of El de la Guitarra, whose name is hard to say because I can't roll my R's, and Junior H. Shout out to green corridos like Arsanios, Efectivo. I like Chelino Sanchez's voice and Ariel Camacho's face. J Balvin and Nicky Jam's X is possible to make love to. We threw raves in Ruben's Palapa until his uncle pulled a cuerno de chivo on a 17-year-old while I was in the cornfield. I'm a guest in this neighborhood, dancing lambada, flying on a bus to a farm. DJ Milos Kaiser has dropped Montajam Vaquero from DJ Ranieli's 1996 LP, Jacaré de Bobera Vida Bolsa. I can no longer feel my feet. Who cares about posers? My playlist on YouTube, Devil Gremory's new song slaps, eats, which is cool. We need more from Salvador do Bahia. Thank you, Cecilia, for turning me on to Nestor Perlonger and his corpses. I hear trumpets, tubas. I'm mud walking and immersed in outside activity. Yeah, I'm mud walking and you're paying the consequences. You're paying the consequences because I'm doing it. You're hearing it. A step behind my opponents. I'm mud walking like I mean it in game 2, intrepid. I'm mud walking, red skies, the sun's glaring. I'm mud walking, not the biggest one in here, but totally giant. I'm mud walking and everything is violent. I'm mud walking, helicopters passing, tanks rolling, soldiers marching. I'm mud walking, feeling explosive. I'm mud walking, no idea where I'm going, but we'll pretend though. I'm mud walking, the earth isn't kind to me, but are you kind though? I'm mud walking, Lebanon is surviving, the news is blaring. Banda Limones, eres una diosa on the jukebox, you're dressed for tacos on Bucareli, fried buche, Chinese gift shops, or Korean. I'm mud walking, don't need a palanquin. I'm fumigated from my enemies, feed me. I can't ever forget my dreams, who was, we. I'm mud walking, bones disjointed. If it's poison, I'm taking it. I'm mud walking, riding 100 meters ahead of me, green chanclas disciplining, my spirit alive now, intocable. I'm mud walking and in the mood for someone to shoot the president and the president-elect. If I break this 100 to get shocked by toques, why'd they order blue cheese, bread, and tomatoes if they want a torta torn to pieces? My rent is $1,700 a month on the border of Brownsville, a good deal, but our neighbor curses Ray and I won't be the one to kill him. I'm mud walking. If you buy a house in Mexico City, you're now a millionaire. I'm mud walking, my eyes tumbados like Natalia's. Lucia and Diego kiss in Del Valle. John Godla's in the USA. The line about 2CB's boring. Don causes dandruff, frantic joking. I'm mud walking. Jenny is taking Elio to the hospital. It's morning in the Middle East. I'm mud walking, using my baby voice, poeticizing. Tumpa tumpa, bibbidi bobbidi boo, ha ha, ya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christopher. That's beautiful. I will now read an introduction that Eleni Sikelianos wrote for Imani. So I will read it as Eleni. Imani Elizabeth Jackson is the author of the chapbooks Context for Arboreal Exchanges, Belladonna 2023, and Sol Sitting, Gloss 2020, and as Mouthfeel, co-author of Consider the Tongue, Paper Machine 2019, with Sean D. Henry Smith. Flag, which received Future Poems 2020 Other Future Awards, is Imani's first full-length collection. Congratulations, Imani. Where are you? I can't see you. Okay. Okay. And it's available here for sale, so you should get a copy. What a joy it is to introduce Imani Jackson, a being who never ceases to delight and astonish me in my waking life and in dreams, states in which we have walked and talked, discussing poetry, politics, rivers, mothers, and in which we have picked persimmons together. A poet beloved to me. Thank you to Mirene, speaking these words now, for inviting me to write this. I have been anxiously anticipating the arrival of Flag so that I can tell everyone to run out and read it. In it, Imani articulates a hydropoetics, and like water, the poems remember all the things they've ever carried. And yet, when I think of Imani, I think she is more like a tree than a river. Deep-rooted, thoughtful, solid, a touchstone for others without being flashy, but rather by being a careful watcher and hearer, in possession of a great well of intelligence and a capacity to draw up sustenance and share it, a poet for the mind to lean on. So perhaps she is a drawer of water, a poet to take refreshment from a circulator. I once wrote of her, I just think Imani is the cat's meow and its pajamas both. She is the voice and the clothing of the voice. What I was trying to say is that Imani's work isn't just telling from the poet's mouth, but is listening to what the world might speak. Indeed, acts of communication are central to the work Imani is doing in the book we're here to welcome and celebrate. In the sequence called Landmouth, the poet plucks at the tensions between the is and the was, revealing how the past is bodied in the present. An exploration of place, environment, land formation, race, racism, settler colonialism, and family. Landmouth digs into the episteme via what the archives tell us and what the speaker knows via the land and via the mouth. I think about topological hauntings, genocides, forced migrations, rivers, erased history. And I think about the things that happen in the mouth, what gets said and what doesn't. There is an ease in Imani's saying, a trust in the told and in the silence it takes to tell, that floors me, woos me, holds me. As she writes, quote, I attempt to interpret what it is that the world might want to write of itself in its instances of grief, rebellion, and joy. What does the earth and water in particular model for us as we move through death into life? This is transformational work that I sit with when I hope to liberate myself, quote, from the blight to which it seems we've been condemned. This is the work, the word that teaches me how to, quote, carry on and realign. Please join us in celebrating this arrival.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mirene, and though she's not here physically, thank you, Eleni, for that introduction, and thank you, Mirene, for reading it for her. Thank you, Christopher, for your reading. I'm really excited that I get to be here with you today and to hear your voice. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Future Poem, as well. I've been sitting with this book for a long time, so I wanted to maybe start with where I'm at and then read a bit from the book. I am from Chicago. I moved back about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. And I keep trying to think about prairies and not getting anywhere yet exactly, but trying. And at some point, I was reading or hearing, I don't quite remember, this anecdote about when the first European settlers arrived in the Midwest, arrived to the prairies, and were just like terrified to be among these grasses. It was like they were in this sea of grasses. And unlike an actual ocean, which you're atop, though there's the threat of drowning, the fear of drowning, you're still separated, you know? You have this sense that you're above it and you can get over it. But in grasses, the only way through is through. So I've been trying to think about that and just like move myself from the sea and from like these river mouths into this other type of sea. And yeah, I'll just start with some notes from that attempt. Beloved, let me redeem myself. Looking west, there was always a terror, a night terror, a haint to ride the sleeping back, and thus I did not sleep. Oh, the terror of that edge into which I cannot speak nor sing, that edge the bullpen of a dream one to be feared into, one pressing around the ribcage and throat. Oh, love. Oh, love. How I am pricked for my faults, pricked by a false line, one made to exact a minute pain, one exquisite pain, which cracks open into the plainest of fields. Love. Oh, ruminant love. Ponder. Some tight circle is keeping me together, one made of terror, of terror, and the slip in the ear. And thus this thing has bred me, has given me a herd. What is in my ear there is something coming in like plain speak. The particularities of our cant are emerging after the long, long repression. An animal sound chewed up again and swallowed, shit out. As would any landscape, this place blooms of its bowels. What I knew was my own sound, its natural song amid this growing scarcity of good music. What I knew was my own sound, and what was my doing, but not my fault. Not my fault, but my fractured place. Oh, love. Oh, love. Looking west, how I bled there, tightened to the herd. When I wandered, still seeking the horizon. Oh, love. How I slipped, yes, slipped out of the sun. How into the scant-angled light, and crept into the plains where still color collects to learn the heart's range. Love lives on my face. Love lives on my face. Love lives on my face. Love lives on. Oh, love lives on my face. Love lives on. Oh, love. Some stems, like revenants, could come back to us with us on our looser line. And you know my life, how it bleeds, for I am not only here. Oh, love, how I am a dog, plainly needing sleep, and you my hand. Oh, love, I have grown weary, so lay me down. And then I'll just read some excerpts from the book. So first, from the title poem Flag. Lately, I am preoccupied with flimsy boats, the shape of them, and the fear I have of open water, which overwhelms me when I'm in it. Always it's cutting me somewhere in my lower half. That is, the ocean's hard materials are cutting me at my heels, my ankles, my knees. Today I studied a photo of a precarious tent with thin cotton for cover, some sticks that might fall over, and the tent was incidental. The photo was of a man. He stood by the sea, smiling, the tent atop a flat rock. And I thought of certain objects used to warn off thieves, their careful and flimsy arrangement. And I thought of the beach in Florida, buried wind, the impotence of some objects. I could have lived there. I do live there. In some sense, it's one point of departure. I would like to live usefully. Present conditions fail that possibility, and I give way to capacity. My mother used to enter people with a camera, tiny and sterile, through the rectum or the throat. She'd see them, loop their flaws. They'd sit upright and thank her. Land, the gut came like tide. Flesh falls towards shiftless sleep. It's a faulty arrangement. Most streams run concurrent. Here, to a flaw. In fact, you may make it up. You may be, and I, a love fallen into. Staked in situation, I plant. I might be eucalyptic. I might be. Allied to land. My country is coincidental. My friend is hardwired for opacity, and sometimes I write to her or think to write to her. My banner is a shawl, multifunctional as a towel and sack. I like to cloak myself in color, any color that would draw me. This contrasts with my previous insistence on neutral dress. My friend, a rose lake on an open boat set, taking on memory, shade ebbs with time. Oil top, dilute again. Other extractions would yield a concrete or an absolute. This morning I watched water gather more water, speed towards shore, gather surface, rise, break on itself. I lived off a wave, my own. Lays laps in green against the sun I go out askew. A most fragile scene of east. Where I live is a shifting line. And some excerpts from Landmouth. Certain facts stand. My father was born near a river in the South. The South here is the southern United States. The river is the Mississippi. And my father is Prentice James Jackson, born to Angeline and George Sr. in 1949. He was born at home and does not know what time. His birth occurred in a small city in Mississippi called Greenville, which rests in the Mississippi Delta, also called the Yazoo Mississippi Delta, for its arrangement between those two rivers. The town was destroyed during the Civil War by Union soldiers in gunboats. It was rebuilt on higher ground, then wrecked again in 1927 by the Great Mississippi Flood. Black families were barred from evacuating this city, giving Red Cross tents with dirt floors and inferior rations. Black men were made to stay and work the levees without pay, made to wear laborer tags in order to receive rations and to show to which plantation they belonged. Black women with no husband or no working husband were barred from receiving supplies and rations unless they had a letter from a white man, any white man. We are and were a black family. I once asked my father if he would ever move back to our land in Greenville, and he said, "But what if it floods?" He would, but wouldn't want to be wrecked by a flood like that. We know that Terence Hayes said water has no end game, no ambition. It is pure procedure. And that Toni Morrison said they straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use, but in fact it is not flooding, it is remembering where it used to be. All water has perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. My friend Ramsey used to say our friend Sierra couldn't hold water. She couldn't. She was our big-mouthed best friend who we sometimes didn't tell our business. Or maybe Sierra said this about someone else. I can't remember exactly. We were young. Anyway it went, it was and is remembered. My memories, my history, my present, they are so bound in imagination. There is no concrete way to say what happened before. There is no concrete way to say what was felt or sensed. Sometimes there is a trace. The weather was different then, some winters colder and some summers warmer. The patterns moved, and it was sometimes a human effect. A wash. Floods did then as floods do now, and the rains then were still rain. And what was the intensity of rain? Certain facts stand. The speed of a river determines the speed at which a rock becomes a river rock. It is not the river's water alone that determines the speed. It is not the river's water alone that weathers the rock. The sediments the water carries carry the process. The sediments weather the rock, which at one point prior will have tumbled down jagged and whole to the bed or the bank of the river. Each of these materials remains whole, the water, the rock, the sediment. Each of these materials parts off. So far, I've called it weathering, but it's also termed abrasion. The sediments are abrasive to the rock and the weathered bits, broken off from their source, flow with the water downstream until they rest. And then they are the floodplain, the beach sand, the delta, the mud in the estuary, the silt at the banks, and in the mouth. Concurrence makes it so that some boats and lands share names, as with types of boats and types of people. Consider the word slaver, marking out a person engaged in the slave trade or a ship used in such trade. Slaver also intimates the mouth, its alternate meaning and pronunciation having to do with saliva dribbling out of one's mouth, a brief and bodily stream, if you will. The first American-built slave ship was called Desire. Ships being referred to with she, I will say that she was constructed in Marblehead, Massachusetts. Brenda Quant writes of this in her essay on Desire Lines. Desire lines evidence erosion as created by human or other animal footfall. The slave ship Desire, Quant writes, did not make her maiden voyage with an empty belly. She sailed from New England to the West Indies laden with dried fish, Boston rum, and Pequot Indians. The Massachusetts and Connecticut militias slaughtered great numbers of Pequots. Of those who survived, many of the women and children were enslaved in New England, but some of them were transported to the British West Indies as slaves. Thus, it was Native Americans, rather than Africans, who were the first cargo on the first American-built slave ship. The slaver Desire made this voyage in 1637 and returned 7 months later with cotton, tobacco, and enslaved Africans from the British West Indies. Per the record, the fate of those Africans is unknown, other than their being sold after alighting in Boston. William Pierce, the slaver who captained that slaver, had exchanged the Pequot Indians for those goods and other people. Many rocks are, crudely put, the result of the compression of dead matter. Those rocks, at some point in their lives as such, and by many, is not understood to be life, but inanimacy, non-feeling, incapacity for thought, will eventually be hit with enough of another type of matter to become granular again. Perhaps this way, a word is a rock, a gathering of living and its inevitable dispersal. A word in a mouth or draining from the tip of a pen or the pressing of a keyboard, being hit and hit and hit and hit and made to make sense. Making sense, being lived upon, this word rock in the mouth, making sensation. Sometimes there are no words, or the words are simply not the right ones. Or sometimes the words don't match, or they jumble. It's okay, it's all right, it's all flow. Flow, flow, flow. This is what we do, flow. Even when it appears arrhythmic, there's flow. Such was the pace of the day. We tried to recall which way rivers move, and then I read that all rivers want to make their ways into whatever seas are nearest, and that some lakes, big as they are in reality nothing more or less than river bulges. The rivers collecting and pooling onto themselves, really navel-gazing into a large puddle. I didn't try to fact-check when I read. I simply ran with the sentence. That summer on the island off Maine, the day or days went on with these ideas. We tried to remember, I read, and then we played a little game, trying to say the same word at the same time. It's mostly south that rivers flow. Our mouths opened and opened and opened, and eventually landed at tide. Sometimes there are no words. A lake is such when a river has flown where the land has been higher on all sides. Rarely is land perfectly flat, as such, an inclination to southness. Always aiming for the biggest basin, does all water wish to contain salt? Merger is a process and a practice. What distinguishes instinct from pressure or pull? I forgot about the rain, how the rain fits in, and the underground aquifers. The water table is landed liquid seeping up and south. Sometimes there are no words. Some of us can be traced by how we arrived, which way up or down. Some of us don't remember, simply can't. Certain facts stand. South past Louisiana and Mississippi, my familial origin points, Wilson Harris surveyed Guyana's interior waters and lands. I sensed over the years, as a surveyor, that the landscape possessed a resonance. The landscape possessed a life, because the landscape, for me, is like an open book, and the alphabet with which one worked was all around me. But it takes some time to really grasp what this alphabet is and what the book of the living landscape is. We go south and south and south, past Guyana's aqueous reveals. The meeting of waters in Brazil provides something of an object lesson in confluence. There is the Rio Negro and the Amazon, referred to upriver as the Solimões. The two rivers meet, they share a bed and banks, but the rivers remain distinct. For 6 kilometers, the rivers run this way, pressing up on each other without mixing. This is a consequence of temperature, speed, density, difference. Certain facts stand. The flow rate at the mouth of the Amazon is such that it could fill 83 Olympic pools in 1 second. And so how many mouths for so much water? How much slaver and spittle? How much speech and murmur? How much spillage and seep? How many floods? How many droughts? How many springs? How much silt and soil? How many dredgings and adjustments? How much sunlight? How many freezes? How many trembles? How many stirrings? How many stones and branches? How many dams? How many roots? How much heat? How many ships and shippings? How many people? How much constraint or restraint? How many failures? How many willful misunderstandings? How deep? How many sand boils? How many reversals? How much said and said? How much sediment? How much time? How much rain? How much rain? How much rain? And what was or could be the intensity of the rain? It bears repeating. Toni Morrison said, "All water has perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was." Writers are like that, remembering where we were, what valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place. It is emotional memory, what the nerves and the skin remember, as well as how it appeared, and a rush of imagination is our flooding. And Terence Hayes said, likewise, one's poetics are most evident in procedure and practice. One's poetics should be liquid. Certain constructions fall away. Where I lived, near the bridge under the mall, flows the Woonasquatucket River. I heard that an artist used to live there in the mall behind a false wall. The artist was found out and banned from the mall's premises and now maintains his distance. Another artist used to sleep there, I heard, under the bridge, above the water in a metal cot. No one has told me what happened to her. The stone walls that hold the riverbanks there are cracking and falling apart. There is no plan for repair, I hear. Now, imagine them all tumbling in. Further along the river, the banks lose their stone holds, and the river is instead lined with soil and foliage. I walked there once with a group, and all was half lush in the waning season. There is work, said the river guide, to restore the river's health, uprooting the so-called invasive species, making buffers between the roads and water, remediating the soil. From a bridge, we watched the flow, watched the light, watched the geese and their young. I imitated a cormorant's wings with my elbows, flocking with the birds, and then I turned to walk home alone. Where I'm at and where I've been, are at least a few places. I remember that Belinda was obsessed with steamboats. She was obsessed with the image of steamboats and the possibility of owning one. The possibility of floating up the Mississippi, which I thought was strange and which I now think is strange and alluvial. We were young then, 18. I'd never lived with white people before, only been schooled with them. Anyway, I now think that the obsession was alluvial. Alluvial, that's all about soil. Soil is sediment, basically. The adjective alluvial pertains to rich soil deposited by a stream. Because I've quoted Toni Morrison and read Walter Johnson's book, The River of Dark Dreams, I can tell you about steamboats and what they did to the Mississippi. Steam power became, in these accounts, a sort of alibi for imperialism and dispossession, a deus ex machina that shifted the terrain of conquest to a scale of action beyond politics and war, a literary conceit that acquired a terrible historical correlative when the steamboat Monmouth, packed with Creek Indians being forced out of their homeland, exploded about 20 miles north of Baton Rouge, killing hundreds of those aboard. The steamboat Sublime took expropriation and extermination and renamed them time and technology. The riverbed was flattened, the riverbanks were straightened, the surrounding trees made lumber. The people were killed, the people were enslaved, the steamboat became sublime. Distance was almost annihilated by steam. The cargo could flow quickly, the people could flow quickly, the capital could flow with increased value and quickly. But the river remembered and will. Every ecological act pours forth another, perhaps unprecedented or unexpected. This is called feedback, the environment chatting back. The deforested banks offered no more wood for fuel. The bank soil eroded. The faster, straighter river would flood. The floods would leave swamps at plantation edges, and in these swamps, some enslaved people would sneak off, plot, take leave, leave. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imani. I feel I shouldn't say anything. But yeah, I'm speechless. Thank you both so much for sharing your work with us tonight, Christopher and Imani. I also wanted to thank the event staff support working tonight, Anna, Heather, Nicole, Noah, working tech, as well as Matt, our videographer, and all the volunteers working tonight. Thank you all for coming as well. Please come back to the Poetry Project grab a glass of wine on your way out if you want. Say hi and buy books. Thank you.